Hello everybody, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have a big old book haul. So first off, full disclosure, I have just gotten a brand new camera. This is the first video that I'm actually filming on it. So if everything looks just like a little bit different, or if I'm like looking off into a random direction, it's because everything in front of me looks a little bit different than I am used to. But please let me know, of course, down in the comments if you've noticed an improvement in especially my audio, because essentially that is the reason why I ended up getting a new camera. But the last time I did a book haul was actually, I think, at the beginning of April, and that included everything that I'd hauled from pretty much January, February and March, and this one is going to be everything that I've hauled in April, May and June. Now I have actually posted 2 book hauls already in the last couple of months. I did a separate big birthday unboxing, and I also recently did a romance book haul that included all of the books that I picked up at Rare Edinburgh at the end of May. So none of those books are going to be included in this haul. This is pretty much going to be everything else, and I will link those 2 videos for you guys to check up if you want to know what I was gifted for my birthday or what romance I've hauled recently. So as usual, the structure of this haul is going to be the places where I acquired these books from, and in today's haul we have books that I was gifted, books that I picked up secondhand, books that I bought new, books from publishers and subscription box books. So let us get cracking, starting off with the books that I received from publishers. So the first one is a little bit different in that it is not a book that was sent to me by the publisher, but it's one that I picked up at an event that I went to, I think in the middle of April. I went to an Olivia Blake event in Edinburgh and they had swag bags, and in every bag there was an arc of A Taste of Golden Eye. Oh, this is this book. I've just realized what this is. Somebody posted this book in my Patreon Discord recently and I had no idea that it was this one, but it is A Taste of Golden Iron by Alexandra Rowland, and I believe that this one is a queer fantasy. The synopsis of this one says that a prince finds himself threatened by a conniving foreign ambassador that puts him on the queen's bad side. So to regain her trust, he starts to investigate a mysterious crime with the help of his very handsome bodyguard. From Del Rey, I received a finished copy of Mistral by Heather Walter. This one is the sequel to Malice, and I'm gonna say it's a new adult Sleeping Beauty retelling told from the perspective of the evil fairy that is essentially Maleficent. So in this world we have graces, and they are fairies, and they are employed by rich people essentially to bestow gifts upon them, like beauty, health and all that kind of stuff. And our main character Alice is the dark grace, and she specializes in curses. This one is a sapphic romance as well. I did enjoy the first book. It wasn't my favorite thing ever, but I did find it enjoyable, and it's a relatively quick read. And I did actually start this, so I'm 80 pages into it, but I was reading it when my mental health was really bad, I think at the beginning of May, and I kind of just abandoned it halfway through a chapter and then moved on to a book that I had to read for a live show. But I do definitely want to get back to this one at some point. And from Source Books, I have a gorgeous arc of Monsters Born and Made. It comes in this beautiful slipcase. We also have this bookmark that looks like a ticket in the front as well. This one is by Tanvi Bawa. It's released in September this year, and it follows, I think it's a brother and sister who capture these animals called Mari stags so that their family can afford to eat. In this world there is a competition that the elite participate in called the Glory Races, and when our main character fails to capture a Mari stag for this event, their family can't afford to buy medicine for their chronically ill sister, and so they cheat their way into the Glory Races. This one is a gorgeous book and also a really gorgeous PR package, and I'm hoping to get to this one probably late August, just ahead of its release. Moving on to the books that were gifted to me, Ashley picked me up an elusive hardback copy of Master of Sorrows by Justin T. Call. This one is a book that is on my radar because Ashley from Frolic Through Fiction really loved it, and I believe that this is going to be a 10-book series. It's an adult fantasy. I think that it is quite dark, and it's set in a world where magic is looked down upon, but it can actually provide a lot of help for people with disabilities. I believe that the main character in this series is disabled and uses magic. I've also heard that the disability rep in here is great. The thing that intrigues me the most about this is that I believe it's a villain origin story, but from what I've heard from Ashley, the main character is kind of like this sweet little cinnamon roll, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets from here to being the villain of the story. As a birthday gift from one of my wonderful patrons, Hannah, I received Night Pleasures by Sherilyn Kenyon, which is one of the Dark Hunter books. This one is a very long urban fantasy like the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter Hunter series, like the Changeling series by Nalini Singh. And this one is about a woman who comes from a family of witches and psychics, and her sister is a vampire hunter. One day she is the victim of an attack that should have been for her sister, and she finds herself handcuffed to a dark hunter. All I know about the dark hunters is that they're immortal warriors. I don't know if they're vampires or something like that, but I've heard great things about this series, so I'm excited to give it a try. The next two are not technically like gifts, but I did get them from friends. The first one is The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang, and this one is the first book in, I'm guessing it's like the Theonite War series, because on the front it just says a Theonite War story. But when I went to Edinburgh, I visited the wonderful G from Book Roast, and she let me have a little rifle through her unhaul stack. This is one that I actually don't know too much about, aside from that it's an indie fantasy, and I think that it follows some legendary warriors. I think G actually DNF'd this, although I can't remember the reason why, but it's one that's been on my radar for a little while. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it, but I'm very excited to have it. One that Ashley had a spare copy of was Heart of the Fae by Emma Hamm. This one is an indie fantasy romance. I know that Emma Hamm writes a lot of like monster romances, but I don't think that this is one of those. I'm assuming it's just a fairy romance, but it actually doesn't have a synopsis on the cover or inside, like on the first page. On the back, all it says is once upon a time a midwife fell in love with a king. So color me intrigued. I'm always down for a fairy romance, we know this. So while we're talking about my trips to Edinburgh, I did pick up quite a few new books when I went in April. I also brought back a ton of books when I went in May from Rare. But in April, I did film a video with Ashley where we went to Blackwell's and she picked 3 books that she thinks that I might like. And at some point, I'm going to do a follow-up vlog and find out if she was right. But the first one, and the one that I'm probably most excited for, and the only one of the 3 that I probably would have picked for myself, is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is obviously a very popular romance book, and I have been getting more into contemporary romance recently. The only thing that's been putting me off this is that I know that it's Raylo fanfic, and specifically I think based off the actors that portray the characters as opposed to the actual characters themselves. So this one is between, is it a PhD student? Yeah, a 3rd year PhD candidate and Adam Carlson, a young hotshot professor. I think that it's a Grumpy Sunshine romance, which I haven't had the best track record with them, so I am a little bit worried about that as well. But everyone does seem to love it, so I guess we'll see how I feel about this one. Apologies for any angle change there, we just had a guest, so I just paused my filming. But Ashley also picked out Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. This one is the first book in the Patternist series. All I know about Octavia E. Butler in general is that they are a prolific like sci-fi writer, and I've been a little bit scared of their work for a while because I assume it's going to be like super dense, like more literary sci-fi than genre fiction, but I do know a lot of people who really love this author. So the thing that drew Ashley to this one is that the first line of the synopsis says it begins when 2 immortals meet an African forest, and the end of the synopsis says, in an epic story of love and hate, Doro and Anyanwu chase each other across continents and centuries, a power struggle that echoes through generations. Together they will change the world. I love me some immortal characters. I am, like I said, a little bit unsure about this one, but we'll see if I enjoy it. And the final one that Ashley picked out for me is one that she actually also has herself but hasn't read yet, which is The Coward by Stephen Aryan. This one would be perfect for a future polathon as it is an adult fantasy set in like a snowy setting, but this is about a character who set off with a group of fighters to slay a beast called an ice lich, and he returned victorious but alone. This story is actually set 10 years after that event when a new terror has risen to threaten the world, and our main character has to take up arms once again to fight it off. Also in Edinburgh, I picked up Under the Whispering Door by TJ Clune. Earlier this year, I read and loved The House in the Cerulean Sea. This one is about a man who's recently died, but he's struggling to accept it, and a reaper comes to collect him from his sparsely attended funeral, and he goes to some like mystical tea shop where the owner helps him to reconcile everything he needs to so he can cross over. Considering that his funeral is sparsely attended, and the synopsis also describes him as being outraged, so I think he's a little bit of a difficult character, and this book is going to be, I assume, about him coming to terms with his own death and also, I guess, learning to be a little bit of a better person. From Amazon, I also picked up the first 2 books in the Savage Lands series, so that is Savage Lands, which I I've now already read, and Wildlands. These are the first two books in an indie fantasy romance series. It's urban fantasy, but it also feels very dystopian. So this is set about 20 years after the Fae Wars, and we're following a main character who was actually born on the day that the veil between the worlds of the human and the Fae fell. Since then, the city of Budapest and the entire world has been split into two. So this is set in Budapest, and the humans live on one side and the Fae live on the other. Main character is the daughter of this legendary general, and she's also the ward of the king. And from her position of privilege, she gives back to the people of the lower classes by stealing drugs from the trains that transport them throughout the city and put the drugs back onto the streets so that the money is in the hands of the people who need it instead of the elite. And one day she's caught and thrown into this terrible, like, notorious prison. Really enjoyed the first book. I picked these up because the author was going to be at Rare, and I keep seeing this series recommended alongside Fortuna Swan, which is my favorite indie fantasy romance series. Took me a while to warm up to the first book, but by the end I was hooked, and I'm very excited to hopefully be reading this one soon. Moving on to the books that I picked up secondhand, I once again picked up one of these in Edinburgh, which was Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. And as you guys know, I have already read this one, but I collect the old editions of the Robin Hobb books where they're available. So that is the first 3 series in the realm of the Elderlings, and at the time I could not find a matching copy of Mad Ship anywhere for a decent price. They were like £10 and upwards, where for the rest of them I paid maybe £4. So I got this one from Armchair Books in Edinburgh, which I believe is a pretty well-known secondhand bookshop. This one is the second book in the Live Ship Traders, which is the second series in the realm of the Elderlings, and it centers around these live ships. So after 3 generations of a family have died on the decks, the ship quickens and comes to life, and like the figurehead is like the personality of the ship. The entire ship is alive, but they can communicate throughout the figurehead, and the figurehead is kind of like a person. We're mainly following the Vestrit family in this one, and when the patriarch of the family dies, the youngest daughter thinks that she's going to inherit the ship because she's been sailing with her father for a long time. However, at the last minute, he wills the ship to Althea's brother-in-law instead, and she is on a quest to get her ship back. We're also following a pirate in here who is on a quest to become the first king of the Pirate Isles. This is my favorite series in the realm of the Elderlings so far, so I'm glad that it's now complete. I also went to a charity shop in Hull and picked up 3 books. Their selection was really great, but I picked up a copy of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I mainly picked this one up because I have already read it. I read it in 2018, gave it 5 stars, but I got it from the library, so I never had a copy of my own. This cost me £1.25. So I decided to pick up a copy for my collection. And Taylor Jenkins Reid just has a talent for writing biography style books about fictional people that don't actually exist. So this one is following Evelyn Hugo, who was this like famous Hollywood starlet. I think she's in her 70s at the time that she's telling this story, but she contacts a specific reporter and asks that reporter to be the person to tell her story. And the narrative follows the main thing that everybody wants to know about Evelyn, and that is which one of Evelyn's 7 husbands was the one that she loved the most. I also picked up the 3rd book in the, oh my god, what is it? Why can't I remember what it's called? What is this series called? First Law. The First Law trilogy, which is Last Argument of Kings. This one once again cost me £1.25, so I picked it up even though I don't have the 2nd book in this series yet, and I haven't yet read the 1st. This one is a grimdark series. Joe Abercrombie is known as Lord Grimdark, so I'm expecting it to be super dark and super gritty, but it is an adult fantasy following a group of characters, one of which is a torturer. I've heard that the 1st book is pretty much just set up and mainly about the characters as opposed to any plot, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be reading this series within the next year, and I've heard excellent things about it, so I really expect to love it. And then the last one that I picked up secondhand was The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. This one is the 2nd book in the Wheel of Time series. I actually want the Wheel of Time series in the new landscape editions, but this one costs 60 pence and it's an adult fantasy. Like, new adult fantasy costs £9.99 in the UK as like the standardized price these days, so I couldn't resist for 60 pence, even though once again I haven't started this series yet. Wheel of Time is an epic fantasy series. I've watched the 1st season of the TV show, but in terms of the series overall and the books, I don't really know a great deal what they're about, but based on the show, it is about the search for the Dragon Reborn, which is this legendary figure that comes around once every like generation or so many years that is fated to either save the world or destroy it. And the final section we have today is my subscription box book. So I'm going to be starting off with my Goldsboro Science Fiction and Fantasy Fellowship. This is a subscription that I do pay for every month, and I think the April book was Wild and Wicked Things by Francesca May. This one I'm a little bit unsure about whether I'm going to enjoy it. I know that it involves magic and the premise in that regard sounds interesting, but it is set in the 1920s and I'm typically not a fan of historical. But this one is going to be included in the next installment of the vlog series I've been making, which is the Goldsborough Science Fiction and Fantasy Fellowship worth my money? It does have really gorgeous gilt edges on here. So it's a very pretty book. Actually, I just really like the cover. I'm hoping I enjoy it, but I don't have exceptionally high hopes. I should say as well that these subscription box books, I don't know as much about them as the rest of the books that I typically haul, mainly because they're books that are selected for me by somebody else as opposed to ones that I sort out myself. But the Goldsborough book for me is Colourbound by Rebecca Zahabi. This is one of the ones from Goldsborough that I've been most excited about in a while. It seems more like it's my kind of thing. We have an ombre edge on here. This one is a high fantasy series. We have magic in here with mages, and we're following a refugee and a slave who are unlikely allies, but they form a friendship as a rebellion is sweeping through the world. I think next we will do the Fairy Loot books. So I am a rep for the YA Fairy Loot and I pay for the adult Fairy Loot subscription myself. So for the YA books, we had a paperback that was an extra book in, I think it would be the April box, and that is An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan. I have read an Emily X.R. Pan book before, which was The Astonishing Colour of After, which I enjoyed, but it's not my typical thing because it's more fabulism than fantasy. And this one does seem to be pretty much the same, although it has more of a romantic twist to it. It's a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet retelling where we're following two characters from feuding families who are inexplicably drawn to each other. For Fairy Loot's May book, I think we have The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This one also was one of the Book of the Month picks, but I've decided to keep the Fairy Loot edition because it's a little bit more of an exclusive edition. But this one is a 1001 Nights retelling about a woman who is a thief and who is blackmailed by the Sultan into finding a magical lamp. The Fairy Loot April book was Blood Scion by Deborah Fillet, and this follows a main character who's descended from the gods. I believe in this world it's legal to have magic, and the main character's mother actually disappeared trying to hide her abilities, and our main character is conscripted into the enemy army where she decides that she's going to try to rise through the ranks and destroy her enemies. For the first three adult Fairy Loot picks, we have The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake, which is a book that I've actually already read because I had the self-published version of this, but this one is a dark academia fantasy following a cast of characters who are the best in their like respective magical fields. So we have like a physicist, an illusionist, a naturalist, and they are all given an invitation by Atlas Blakely to the Alexandrian Society, which is this like prestigious secret society. However, there are 6 of them given this invitation and they have to go through like a 12-month kind of trial period, and at the end of it only 5 of them are actually going to be chosen to become part of the Alexandrian Society. For the, is this the April pick, we had City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This one I haven't heard the best things about. I've actually heard very conflicting things about this, but the overwhelming consensus from people I know who've read it is that they didn't love it. But the beginning of the synopsis for this one says, the 4 realms, life, death, light and darkness, all converge on the City of Dusk, ruled by the 4 noble houses of Nexus. This one follows the 4 heirs, I think, of the 4 ruling noble houses, and it does sound like something that I would really enjoy. Like I said, I haven't heard the best things yet. And then the Fairy Loot book for May was Book of Night by Holly Black, which I am going to give this book a try. If you guys are familiar with my channel, you will know that I'm not a big fan of Holly Black. I don't really like her writing style, but as this is her first adult book, I will give it a go. It is shorter than I expected. I don't really know what it's about because it's not a book that I ever really wanted, but now that I have it, I am going to try it. And a segue into the Illumicrate books, Book of Night was also the May Illumicrate book. I'm keeping both of these editions at the minute until I've read the book and decide if I like it, but I don't think I'm actually going to want to keep both of these when I finish the book. And the Fairy Loot one, the black and gold one, is my favorite out of the 2. They're both stunning, both very different, but I think the black and gold is more my thing. So cannot lie, my battery died while I was filming, so I popped it on charge and I've been for a beer. My alcohol tolerance level is pretty low since I stopped drinking very much when I was like 23, so I'm a little bit buzzed, but we're gonna get through the rest of this haul. So the April Illumicrate book was Portrait of a Thief by Grace DeLee, and I don't actually think that this one is sci-fi or fantasy, but it does sound really interesting. It is about a group of, I'm going to assume they're teenagers or in their early 20s, but they are heisting a bunch of museums to take all of the priceless artifacts that Western countries have like taken from other countries and other cultures. So it sounds like a really fun heist story and I'm excited to read it, but it's not sci-fi or fantasy. And then the quarterly Afterlight box from Illumicrate is their romance box, where you get one romance book and a couple of like self-care items every 3 months. And was this May? Or April, June, the most recent box anyway. But the book for that was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. This one is an adult contemporary romance and I've heard that it's very messy and really good. Like, I've heard great reviews. Everybody I think who's read this book so far has given it like a glowing review, which is interesting because I picked this up in a bookshop before it came in the Afterlight and I read the synopsis and I thought it sounded a lot more like a contemporary than a romance, but apparently it's like straight up romance. The synopsis is very short, but it says that the main character is about to be given the chance to escape the city's blistering heat for a dream island holiday, and then it says the only problem is she's falling for the one man she absolutely can't have. So I'm really excited to see what the deal is with this. Wasn't super excited about it until I saw everyone's reviews, and now I'm excited. And then the last stack of books I have are all book of the month books. They are the books from May and June that I decided to keep, so the ones that I'm interested in. The first one is Darling Girl by Liz Mikulski. This is the fantasy pick from May, I think. And this one is a Peter Pan retelling. I think it's following the granddaughter of Wendy. Yes, Holly Darling, the granddaughter of Wendy, and it's set in contemporary times. Don't love Peter Pan retellings. I love the idea of Peter Pan, but I don't like Peter Pan as a story and I always find it to be really sad. I keep reading Peter Pan retellings hoping one's going to be a hit, and some of them are enjoyable, but like I just don't like Peter Pan. But I'm going to try this out anyway. One that I'm really excited to read and might be reading soon is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This one is a supernatural suspense novel and it is for fans of Mexican Gothic and Rebecca, and Rebecca is my favourite classic and also one of my, well, it is my favourite Hitchcock movie, so I'm really excited for this one. I've heard mixed things about this one. And then we have One Romance, which is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and this one is between a woman and a ridiculously hot carpenter who's 10 years younger than her. So we have an age gap romance, which in life I don't like age gaps. Like, for me personally, like, do what you want. But the only age gap romance I've read I enjoyed, which was Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. And then the last three are all thrillers, because you know I love me a thriller from time to time. Even though I don't read them often, I really want to do a thriller vlog, but I feel like that should be in fall, but there's just so many like cool fall videos to do. So this one is about a journalist that the first, have I told you what this is called? This is Breathless by Amy McCulloch, and this one is about a reporter who is writing a story on this famous mountaineer. So they go on this mountain climbing expedition, and when the climbers start going missing one by one, everybody starts to get a little bit concerned, as you would, I feel. The Lies We Tell by Maggie Clark. This one is about a con artist and the woman she conned who is waiting. She's waited for 10 years for the chance to like get her revenge, and this book is the woman's revenge, I believe. I don't know a lot about thrillers. I was talking to somebody, I think it was Ashley, about this the other day. If I was in the mood for a thriller and I didn't have any, I would just go into like a charity shop and pick up any thriller, because I don't actually care what they're about. If I'm picking up a thriller, it's for the vibe, not the plot. Like, I expect all thrillers to deliver the kind of thing that I like from thrillers, which are different, so it's not always the case. But I will just pick up a thriller. I don't care which one it is. If I want a thriller, I don't mind what I'm actually reading, which is weird. But the last thriller is Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. So this one is a woman who is charged with the murder of her celebrity husband, and she's worried that with the media attention, people are going to start looking too closely to her and figure out who she is. And then we're also following a woman who was convicted of a similar crime. Those are all of the books that I've hauled in the last 3 months. I don't even know if I've been staring at the viewfinder instead of the lens the entire time I filmed this last section of the video. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me and the teething issues that I'm having with a new camera. And literally, just as I was saying that it always takes a little bit of time to adjust to new tech, my memory card filled up and I had to delete some stuff to be able to continue this video. I've had so many interruptions filming this video, so it has been a rough one, but thank you guys so much for sticking with it. We will get better and more professional in the future. But that is it for this video today, guys. Down in the comments, please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. But aside from that, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you enter my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.